Let's talk about bankruptcy. A fresh start's closer than you see. It rebuilds lives and brings back smiles. This is the Bankruptcy Files.
Hi, Bankruptcy Buddies. Welcome to the Bankruptcy Files. I'm Lauren Clark, a South Carolina attorney who has been representing debtors for close to 17 years now. And today, I'm so excited about this show. We are joined by Dee, my paralegal, also my co-host on Remote Reality, which is not children friendly. It is a podcast where we recap shows like 90 Day Fiancé, Sister Wives, Southern Hospitality. We also do a little true crime. In that podcast, we've been doing that for about a year. We did have some episodes about the Alec Murdaugh appeal. Now, Dee and I watched every day of the Alec Murdaugh trial, which is local for us. But when it happened, we watched it faithfully.
We were glued. We were
We were
to
not
it.
podcasting at the time because we definitely had a lot to say about it. But we did recap the appeal. And the part I want to talk about here with the Bankruptcy Buddies on the Bankruptcy Files is let's talk about the Richard Alec Murdaugh versus Rebecca Hill lawsuit that has been filed in our federal courts, the ones that I practice in right here in South Carolina, alleging that she has violated his constitutional rights, that Becky Hill has deprived Alec Murdaugh of a fair jury trial, and they're seeking $600,000 for what he paid in attorney's fees, since now they have to retry that case, as well as their own attorney fees in this appeal. Now, what I want to talk about is, let's say she doesn't file an answer. Let's say Becky Hill just has this go to a default judgment. Or let's say they find that she did this. More likely than not, she's liable for the $600,000. So admitting that she owes the debt, I want to see, how are they going to get this money from her? This isn't an insurance company where you sue and they have deep pockets and they're going to pay out a big amount for the injuries. This isn't the government, which they are suing her in her personal capacity. There would be different standards under this civil rights section if they were suing her employer. And we also have concepts like sovereign immunity, which can limit damages. But let's say the courts somehow find that she's completely responsible for this. What can they even do in South Carolina? Good question. Before we get into that, though, let's talk about the lawsuit a little bit. Let's just dig into it a little bit. So recently in the appeal, the Supreme Court said that Rebecca Hill went and said things to the jury that she shouldn't have said, which as far as it affecting their outcome, there was a presumption. The law presumed it would, and it was up to the state to show that it didn't. And there were too many questions with things that had happened where they found a new trial was the appropriate conclusion. One of the first things I'm thinking is Rebecca Hill really the reason that Alec Murdaugh pulled $600,000 out of his 401k to hire defense attorneys? He did that because he was charged with the crime of killing his wife and son. Innocent or not, he needed a defense. In cases like this, it's hard to prove that, like, if you get prosecuted for something and you're found not guilty, you can't go and sue the state for prosecuting you. And this is different. I definitely see how this is different, but comparative liability. What are the reasons that Alec has to pay $600,000? Now, I've heard Jim Griffin talk in a media event. He was talking to reporters and he explained that the fee that they charged, the $600,000, was a flat fee and it covers everything. The trial, the appeal, potentially the new trial. He says sometimes you come out ahead on this, but sometimes you're behind. And right now that they're in the hole. So I don't know what the scope of that agreement was. If the scope of the agreement was we are covering the appeal and we're covering a new trial, if that takes place, then are there more damages? The attorneys have to work, but they agreed to do all of that work for $600,000. There's not an additional fee. Is it a headache? Yeah.
Well, my biggest question is she wasn't the only reason they found on the appeal. So if she didn't exist, he would still have gotten the trial.
Potentially.
Yes. Right. So does that
I
make a difference,
agree.
or would it make a difference in a situation like this where they're suing her? Would it lessen the amount, or could it possibly be that she wouldn't owe anything because there was still something else?
I agree with you. When we look at that appeal, when we covered it, Becky Hill, that's the reason that they stood on. They said, this is why we're granting a new trial. But then they went and they addressed another point that the defense attorneys raised in Murdaugh's appeal, which were the financial crimes. And that was something that from the beginning, from the time we watched that, I said, I
Mhm.
don't think that's admissible. And I didn't think it was admissible under the same
Right.
reasoning the court found, 403, that it is more prejudicial than probative. For me, it didn't really show a motive because Alec Murdaugh, if he's killing his wife to get her assets, his creditors couldn't go after her assets in
Mhm.
these lawsuits that they're talking about. If his creditors sued him and got a judgment, his wife's assets are protected from
Mhm.
his creditors. It would only
It
be
seemed more character. It seemed more after his character than
right.
motive.
And that's what the court found. They said they went too far and too deep into the financial crimes, that he sat there and admitted
Mhm.
that he stole money from clients, which is horrendous and disgusting. And he definitely deserves jail time for it. But linking that to him being a murderer, how they discussed the infirmities of one of the people he stole money from, it was too much.
Mhm.
So the court has a lot of discretion when it comes to allowing that evidence. There would have been a lot more legal hurdles to jump and to explain why that would be a reason for a new trial. I think the reason that they based it on Becky Hill was that was the simplest way out without them
Mhm.
having to go into a full analysis of the financial crimes. But they were
Mhm.
still so troubled by the financial crimes that the South Carolina Supreme Court came out and said, think about this next time you do
Mhm.
this trial. Since we're doing a new trial, let's just toss this one around our head and maybe not go that far and that deep,
Mhm.
because this was problematic to us too. So absolutely, Dee, causation. Is Becky Hill the cause of this money spent? But, and these cases are hard to prove, but for these purposes, for what I want to talk today to
Mhm.
the bankruptcy buddies about on the bankruptcy files, let's say that she owes all of this money. They get a judgment against her. What happens next? So this is in federal court under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 69. Yes, Rule 69. We are going to take this judgment and go by the laws of this state. So every state has different laws. If you are sued by a creditor and they have a judgment against you, there are laws as to how that creditor can collect.
Mhm.
So Becky Hill lives in South Carolina. I was able to do a little digging in records, as we do for
Mhm.
our bankruptcy
That's our
cases,
job.
looking for the assets, seeing what might be available. So, first of all, let's talk about how a lot of creditors collect wage garnishment. In South Carolina, we're a special little state. We're like
Mhm.
one of 4 or 5 that only allow wage garnishment in extremely specific situations. So,
Mhm.
alimony and child support, domestic
Mhm.
support obligations, they can garnish wages. The government can garnish wages here. So taxes, student loans that are unpaid that are federal, even hospitals and medical debt where the government is giving money to help fund the state hospital, they're
Mhm.
considered an arm of the state. And under one of our tax programs, the South Carolina GEAR program, they can garnish wages. And then there's another exception. So if you are in, let's say, Georgia, and you get sued and your creditor starts garnishing your wages, you can't just hop the border over to South Carolina and be like, haha, can't get me now. The law of the state that you were in where the judgment was entered is what is going to apply. So, not legal advice, just kind of a general rule here.
Mhm.
This case doesn't fall into those situations. Becky Hill is not going to be paying this $600,000 judgment through wage garnishment, assuming that she has a job. So now, what about assets? What could a judgment creditor take? Now, retirement, it's typically protected in South Carolina from creditors. And I say typically because there's always rules and exceptions, and this is why you want to talk
Mhm.
to a local attorney. So let's say she has some retirement saved up from that job. Alec, he's not going to be able to touch that. And some of our statutes even protect retirement and the proceeds, what the retirement is used on. So we're not garnishing wages. We're not going after retirement. What about a house? So I did see she owns a house with her spouse. The value on that, there's a range, but let's say it's about $240,000. Tax assessed value is only $140,000. There are laws that protect equity in a house. Now, they wouldn't be able to touch your husband's half, so you cut that in half. But really, there might be, after administrative costs, given the husband his half of what the house sells for, what she might have left over right now, maybe $30,000. And those laws that protect houses, they change every 2 years in South Carolina. Every even numbered year, they increase with inflation. 2 years ago, we saw the biggest jump. But right here, July 1st, in just about a month, we're going to see the amount of equity in her home that she can protect go up. So really, there may not be anything to take even from the house. As far as assets, I didn't see any vehicles in her name. They're all in her husband's name.
What would happen if somebody like in her situation had a house that was paid for and they just went and put it in somebody else's name to protect it? Would they be able to do that?
So that's a good question. First of all, it does look like her house is paid for. And this is one thing that attorneys do. Like usually you see insurance companies being sued, but they do look to see if I take this lawsuit, are we going to be able to collect? That's a good question, though. Let's say that she took the house and transferred it to her husband. What we would be looking at then is a fraudulent transfer. And in South Carolina, you can reach back up to 6 years to undo transfers that were made during a time of insolvency. Basically, she would be giving the house to her husband for $5 love and affection. They could give him the $5 back and take the house. And that happens in bankruptcy as well as outside of bankruptcy. And the laws vary from state to state. Federal law even has reach back periods. But that's a good question because it's one that we get a lot with bankruptcy. Why can't I just transfer the asset? Because they know that that's going to be everybody's first thought. And the law has ways of remedying that.
And that's what makes it a fraudulent transfer is like if you know that you're in a situation where you're
It's
either going to
not
be
just that,
sued or
and there are multiple types of fraudulent transfers. So some of them do have to do with your intent, but some of them have to just do with the timing. But there can be assets that Becky Hill has that I don't know about. I just did some little county searches.
what's something that they would do to find out what assets she has?
Private investigator looking through different systems that have data. I don't know that she is collectible. I don't know that she is collectible. So she's going to have this big lawsuit. If they find she owes $600,000, Becky Hill, to Alec Murdaugh because she interfered with the jury and she did something wrong and she owes that money, I don't know how they're going to get it. This seems to be like something for publicity, for proving a point.
If they did get a judgment, I mean, how long would it last? Like, is it something that,
And
say,
that
in
varies
5
state to
years or
state.
10
So in
years?
South Carolina, judgments expire after 10 years.
So if she became a millionaire in 15 years, he couldn't get the money from her.
15 years after the date of judgment.
Okay.
And a lot of that is like, it depends. Did her right to collect this money arise before? I mean, it's complicated. But right now, just looking, I don't know how they're going to collect this from her.
Yeah,
And
it
in
doesn't
different
look like-
states, it can be different rules. Let's say she moves out of state in the next 10 years and goes to a state that has different exemptions. Yeah, it's just, this is going to be hard to collect. So even a lot of people are saying, should she pay this? Should she pay this? My question is, can she pay this? Is the law going to require her to pay this?
And I mean,
And
there really isn't anything that could happen to her if she couldn't pay it, right? Like there's no debtor's prison or anything like that. So if she doesn't have the money to get it.
Well, and again, that's another good question. In South Carolina, they do have supplemental proceedings. You were asking how they might find out about the asset. So if a judgment creditor gets a judgment against you, they can call you into a supplemental proceeding to testify about your assets. It's a lot like the 341 in bankruptcy court. Now, those are usually done by subpoena, and if you don't show up, they could issue a warrant for failure to show up, but it's not for not paying the debt. So, and that's another way that they can discover assets. I don't know that this is collectible though. As far as bankruptcy, could she file bankruptcy and get out of it? Lawsuits under this, it would turn on whether or not the action was willful and malicious. So the courts have already found that she willfully did this, but was it malicious? Are we going to define this as malicious? Or was this just reckless and greedy because she wanted to sell her plagiarized books? And actually, I talked to another attorney, a friend of mine, about the same thing. Is she collectible? And he goes, well, what about the proceeds from her book? And I said, well, Becky Hill's book got pulled because she was plagiarizing. So, bankruptcy buddies, that's my thoughts on this Becky Hill case. I don't know how they're going to collect from her. Of course, she might have assets I don't know about, but as far as what I'm able to discover, I'm not seeing anything.
It's probably just to make a point.
And of course, I've got questions about causation. We will see how this goes. We will be covering the new trial, at least over on Remote Reality.
Yes.
And this is something I've wanted to talk about with Alec Murdaugh. This relates back into being a debtor. When someone sues you and you owe money, Becky Hill, you become a debtor of that money. And then my debtor brain starts working. How do they get that money? And my answer is I don't think they do. All right, bankruptcy buddies, we will see how this all turns out. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We will be back next week. And hope you have a great weekend. It's the beginning of summer.
Yes. We need the beach.
And you know what? If you don't live near a beach, just go outside, sit in your sprinkler, get a little vitamin D. We're vacationing on a budget. Anyway, you guys have a great weekend and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Disclaimer. The Bankruptcy Files does not provide legal advice. Commentary on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, including discussions of public bankruptcy cases and online content. Listeners should consult a qualified local attorney. Interacting with this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. Hosts and guests speak in their personal capacity. The Bankruptcy Files is not affiliated with any employer or law firm and is not a debt relief agency or provider of legal services.